Hi, let's talk for a few minutes about the structure of the novel and a couple of novels in particular, one by Joan Lowry Nixon and a student novel by Juanita Rivers called Letters in the Attic. The reason I want to talk about these two together is that there is really quite a similarity between the two books. The one by the queen of juvenile fiction for many years, Joan Lowry Nixon, who wrote many novels about teenage girls in Texas, especially in East Texas, and who were going through some kind of enormous conflict and change. Okay, at the beginning of this book, called Shadowmaker, our protagonist is going to a new school. She's not only going to a new school, she's moving to a new town. And so at the end of the first chapter, we find her difficulty, her dilemma, the problem that's essential to the beginning of any novel. Okay, let's take a look at that. If we pick up virtually any novel, we'll find that all the scenes along the way are constructed so that they point to answering the story question. And each one ends with a portentous line itself. Each scene ends with, like this one, Tammy's father came to pick her up a little after 10, and I noticed that the crowd had begun to thin out. I purposely began searching for Lana Jean, even checking all the rides. But I couldn't find her. Notice, big finish, but I couldn't find her. Okay, it turns out that there's a prowler. She has moved to this little town along with her mom, who is a single mother and a novelist that some people in town don't want there because they're afraid she's going to write a novel about an undercover operation or something that has been covered up in the town. So there's a prowler. The sheriff comes and advises them that maybe they would be happier if they lived in some other town. Okay, the first chapter ends then with our protagonist going to, let's get in focus here, going to a new school, and what happens? Okay, in chapter 2, we're still in the opening stages of the book. We find that she doesn't like the new house where she lives. It was misery waking to the alarm clock, and the chill of the bare wood floor stung my toes. Down to the next paragraph. The badly worn boards had been gritty with beach sand and dirt scuffed with a mixture of bare footprints and the intricate design of whirls. Okay, and the mom says, I thought we'd find something like this when I discovered the door was unlocked. Mom had said. So the place has been vacant and unlocked all of this time. The first chapter ends with Mom smiled. We're both exhausted. Let's forget all about this craziness and get to bed, okay? Okay, I answered, and walked off toward my room at the back of the house. I held the curtains back so I could stare out the window into the darkness, searching for movement among the shadows, yet terrified that I might see it. I wish Mom had answered my questions. It wasn't okay. Now, notice that the end of this chapter ends with what we might call a portent, something that points toward the future, questions that have to be answered. What is all of this about? And that's the way the end of a chapter, or a scene for that matter, has to be. It has to end with something portentous, something that will point us toward the next scene, the problem of the next scene, always pointing toward the future. If we look at chapter 2, we find that now she goes to school. There are problems being in a new and unfamiliar school, and that chapter also ends with a portent. Let's take a look. The other three scattered down the almost empty hall, but I paused for a minute trying to figure things out. No matter what I wanted to do, it didn't seem to matter. I was stuck here in Cluny High School until Mom's novel was written. No alternatives, no choices. I took a deep breath and went off to class. Well, of course that points us toward the future. She's stuck in this new school. She doesn't like it. What's going to happen? If we look through the novel, we'll find that every single one of the chapters ends on something portentous. Notice how it's a kind of a big finish there, the last line. No alternatives, period. No choices. I took a deep breath and went off to class, period. Okay, and we need to end our scenes and chapters on big finish lines. As a matter of fact, we need to make sure that everything in that chapter is building up to that closing line. It may not seem to, but it will. So let's look at the overall structure of the novel for a moment. As we know, the novel starts with a couple of introductory chapters like those that we just saw, but at the beginning, near the beginning, there has to be some big change for our protagonist. In the case of Joan Lowry Nixon, the big change is she's going to a new town, a new school, and apparently there's somebody out in the shadows trying to get them. So the story question is going to be who and what and what's trying to get them and how's that going to be stopped. And the story question provides almost all of the substance of the novel, up to the final confrontation, up to the climax, and the answering of the story question with the resolution. But essentially, that's it. There's lots of ups and downs in between here, but all of the central chapters of the novel need to be pointing toward the story question, which will be answered up here toward the end. And we'll find out who in the world is trying to hurt our protagonist and Shadowmaker, and the mom will either get her novel written or not, or somehow it will be resolved, and it will be resolved with a big scene. Now, all the scenes along the way, if we pick up virtually any novel, we'll find that all the scenes along the way are constructed so that they point to answering the story question. And each one ends with a portentous line itself. Each scene ends with, like this one, Tammy's father came to pick her up a little after 10, and I noticed that the crowd had begun to thin out. I purposely began searching for Lana Jean, even checking all the rides. But I couldn't find her. Notice, big finish, but I couldn't find her.